This is a demonstration video that will show you how to construct or assemble a sleeve into a bodice armhole. This is the first of two different types of the way that you can put in sleeves into armholes. It really just depends upon the end product that you want. The first one that we're going to do is called the shirt sleeve method, and the second one is going to be a set-in sleeve method. Typically, you use the shirt sleeve method when you're constructing shirts, like dress shirts, or like you can even use this method for doing t-shirts. On knits, you would just use an overedge or a serger type of stitch as opposed to a straight interlocking stitch. So just know that typically these methods are used for different end products. You'll use the set-in sleeve. You'll usually do that method on a nice jacket where you want to have a more rounded shoulder top. So again, it depends upon the method, and your book talks about this a little bit more. So I would go ahead and just read through that, make sure that you familiarize yourselves with when you would use the proper type of sleeve method to connect the sleeve to your bodice or to the armhole, whatever top you're connecting that to. So first, let's go ahead and look at our patterns. Hopefully when you cut these out, you read the note that was along the side here where you needed to line up these edges and then cut out your pattern piece so that we have a full front and back of the sleeve, since we're going around a tubular object, which is our arm. Our arm is kind of like a tube, and so we need to make a sleeve that arm can then go into. We also have our bodice front and our bodice back, and we can see that we're going to be stitching at 5/8 inch pretty much all the way around on every seam that we do, except for around the neck hole. We're going to be doing a 1/4 inch stay stitching, and then we also have a fold back at center front and center back. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and just like set our sleeve aside for the moment, and we want to go ahead and work on connecting our bodice pieces together. Just as a reminder, we have our sewing machine set on a straight stitch about at 2.5, and what we first want to do is we want to do whenever we're working around curved edges, so like the neckline and the armhole, it's always pretty much a good idea to go ahead and put a row of stay stitching in, so that as you manipulate this fabric, your grain lines won't become like pulled one way or another way, and so you're pretty much trying to make it so you're not going to have difficulty when you go to connect the pieces together. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and I'm going to start on the front piece. So I'm going to set my front bodice pattern piece aside, and I'm just going to do a row of stay stitching at a 1/4 inch. So that's about if I run my raw edge along the inside edge of my presser foot. So I'm going to go ahead, and I'm not going to worry about back stitching here. I'm just going to go ahead and run a row of stay stitching right around this neck hole. And what I'm going to do, this is a little trick, is I'm going to go ahead and when I get to the edge, I'm going to stop, raise my needle up, lift up my presser foot, and just pull some thread tails out. And then I'm going to take my back piece, so I'm not going to trim at this moment, I'm just going to kind of continue doing everything. So I'm just going to go ahead and start right where I stopped. I'm going to do a quick back stitch here, and then continue going forward around this armhole, or around this neckline, sorry. And then when I get to the top, I don't need to worry about back stitching because that's going to be going into a seam pretty quickly. Then I can go ahead and trim these thread tails. And what this did is it just kind of cut down on time that it took me to do that stay stitching by not stopping and lifting my presser foot and trimming those thread tails. And what that does is it really cuts down on costs. When we kind of start talking about production, we talk about costs and how much, like every little motion possibly can cut down on, I guess, or if we can reduce the motions, it'll cut down on time, but if we add in more, it adds time, and so the time that it takes to produce even part of a garment or a whole garment, then turns into dollar signs. So, you know, if you can kind of, teach yourself some tricks or come up with some tricks for how you can cut down on that time, it can really help you in the long run. So, all right, so now we're going to do this armhole, and we're going to be seaming. So we're going to be, putting two pieces together and create a seam with our sleeve here. But it's always a good idea to go ahead and put a row of stay stitching in the armhole too. So I'm going to go ahead and just run that raw edge right along the outside of my, or like the inside edge of my presser foot. And again, when I get to the end here, I'm just going to stop, raise my needle up, pull some thread tails, and go ahead and do this other armhole. Just lining everything up as it was before. Lining up that raw edge with the inside edge of my presser foot. As I get to the end, I can go ahead and stop, pull out my thread tails, and then trim everything here all at once. Do one trim instead of doing that in two motions. So just know that that's a possibility of things, of just ways that you can cut down on time. Alright, now what we want to do is we want to go ahead and seam at our shoulder seam. So again, make sure that your necklines are both on the same side and your armholes are both on the same side, and we're going to just match up that shoulder seam with our raw edges together. I'm going to go ahead and put a couple pins in just to keep everything lined up how I have it placed right now, and then I'm going to seam that at 5/8 of an inch because that's what my pattern shows, and I'm going to do some back tacking at the front and end of this seam line. Alright, I can go ahead and trim that. Now what you want to do, and this is always just a good habit, is to go ahead and do some sort of edge finish on this. So I have my pinking shears handy, and I'm just going to trim off about 1/4 of an inch on that seam here so that there's an edge finish that has been done on that seam, so that we're just reducing the likelihood of that to actually ravel. So the next step that you're going to want to do is then go ahead and press this seam open over on the ironing board. So just know that you're going to do that here in a moment. Before we go ahead and kind of jump into attaching our sleeve, let's go ahead and finish off the front and the center back. So we have these markings to fold back at 5/8 of an inch. So hopefully you identified those little notches. There's a notch here and a notch at the bottom at that center front line, and it says, 5/8 of an inch fold back. So we're just going to go ahead and right where those notches are, I'm just going to go ahead and turn those back and then fold that under. So I'm going to fold it back so that the wrong sides are on the inside of the garment. Then I'm just going to go ahead and place a couple pins right along this fold line that I've made. And then I'm going to stitch that straight. But before I go ahead and stitch, I'm going to go ahead and do that on the back side too. I have my notch markings, and I'm just going to go ahead and kind of pinch together on both ends and kind of give myself a straight line to follow. And while I hold that down with my fingers, I'm going to put some straight pins in so that my fold line is nice and flat when I go to stitch that into place. Alright, so I got 3 pins on the front and 3 pins on the back. If you want more, feel free to use more. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch from the top side, and I'm going to again run that, let's see, if we folded it back 5/8, let's go ahead and run that folded edge along the 1/2 inch marking. So make sure that you can identify that on your metal throat plate as well as on your clear bobbin cover. And again, we're going to run this folded edge along that 1/2 inch marking just to hold that 5/8 inch of a fold back in place. And let's go ahead and do a back tack at the top and the bottom of this stitch line here. Alright, I'll do a quick back tack again and be done with that. I can go ahead and trim off those thread tails and then go ahead and do the back one too. I'm going to start from the bottom or the waist area of this bodice as opposed to the top, so that I'm always stitching on the top side of the fabric. Since we aren't creating any sort of seam here, this is actually referred to as top stitching because we're holding some fabric in place by more of a decorative type of stitch than a functional type of seam type stitch. Now if we wanted to have a raw edge that didn't have any stitches showing on the front, we would need to apply a facing to the underside. So there's some stitches there, back tack, and raise that needle and press our foot and go ahead and trim those thread tails. Alright, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and stop the video so that I can press this shoulder seam open, because that's very important that we have a sharp seam to follow for our next step of placing this sleeve in this armhole here. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the video and do that quick press.